cheese, they get some cheese from this village farm and they sell it in their shop, to a larger dairy, larger than what we looked at in the slideshow, that is bringing milk from the entire region and making cheese, making milk, making sour cream, and taking that to the supermarket. In addition to that kind of production, they also have some very small handcrafted items, and one of them, I showed you that in the slides next to honey, is a cheese known as motal. It is a connoisseur cheese, and it's not something that you develop a taste for overnight, but for people that know cheese and understand it, and as I was on tour with some students from a gastronomic university, they were able to verify that this is something that is what you'd find at the gourmet level shops in the U.S.
Artisan.
Excuse me?
They call them artisan cheese.
Artisan cheese, thank you. They have all kinds of sun-dried fruits, not just apricots. Apples, prunes, of course, grapes, which they'll make into raisins, quince, which they'll dry out, and so on and so forth. And because of the way that they grow their fruits, because they actually do have biodiversity of species, which we don't have in this country, there's a unique flavor and taste to it. If you've had tasteless tomatoes in America, you don't have tasteless tomatoes in Armenia. You bite into the tomato and you're amazed at how much flavor it has. In the wine sector, they are very good at what we call the value price in the market. The average wine is not too expensive, not too cheap, but good to drink. They are also good at the very artisan or connoisseur varieties, like the gentleman who's making wine produced using the ancient methods that are still not available. They're not available in Italy or elsewhere. But at the low end of the market, you probably wouldn't like the cheap Armenian white. It's way too sweet. It's almost like grape juice. And they cannot really compete well at the higher end of the market, say the $20 a bottle level. They just don't have the plant equipment to be able to produce that consistently. But they produce very good value wine consistently, and they produce connoisseur wine in small batches that are handcrafted. Any questions? There's a reference on the website for this. There are 540 different plant species in Armenia, 100 times beyond the biodiversity of the average country in the world. So as far as this, if you are interested in the variety of strains of plants, Armenia is one of the places to be. Unfortunately, 35 of these species that were economically important, meaning that they were grown agriculturally and produced and sold, are now extinct, and there are organizations dealing with that problem. Armenians produce organic, high-quality foods by accident, meaning that the average village farmer cannot afford to buy the pesticides necessary to increase the production yield and spray their crops. They may not spray them at all, or they may spray them once at the very beginning of the growing season so the bugs go away, but after that, that's it. So if you look at an apple, it doesn't look like our nice uniform round apples polished with wax. They vary in size, shape, color, and texture, and for many people, they prefer that. There is a movement to produce, and CARD is one of the organizations that's sponsoring this, and I guess we've heard that Armenian Tree Project is another organization that's sponsoring this, and Terpangian is sponsoring this. There's a movement to produce these higher quality organic crops in Armenia for export, because it's not that big of an issue for Armenians to say, yes, we are willing to produce things meeting organic production rules, because the actual truth is they want to produce it the way they've been doing it for years and years and years and years. And you go back far enough, that's what people want to buy. More than likely, the success for this will be in the European Union or in that area because of transportation issues. The volume that they're able to produce and the cost of shipping it will probably preclude this coming to America, for example. Let me also speak to the issue of agritourism. Armenia does some very nominal tourism promotion for a nation of its size with the kind of interesting things that you can do in the country. It's nowhere near enough. And it's unfortunately focused on things that we as the diaspora like to do. It's focused on the monasteries and the churches. It's focused on the handcraft. It's focused on things that we like to do as American Armenians visit Armenia. And it's not really focused on what Europeans like to do or what domestic Armenians like to do. So there's a potential for developing a tourism industry based on agriculture, kind of like the dude ranch mentality, where you go and you live and you work on a village farm and experience this. And there was an article in the New York Times where people are charging $300 to go work on a farm. And I probably wouldn't be interested in doing that for a vacation, but they're getting all kinds of takers. The facilities are quite primitive. They're tents with every comfort of home, but they're still tents. And yes, you do work. You go out there and you muck rake and you milk or you do whatever and learn what it's like to be on a farm. So there's this interesting gap between people that are so away from nature, so away from agriculture, that they're actually willing to spend money to do that on vacation. As you saw, there are very few bed and breakfast or hotel facilities in Armenia that will meet the standards of a person from the West who has, works a lot and wants to have a quality vacation. So that's an area where work needs to be done. There's also no reliable domestic bus transportation network or train transportation network. All of the transportation you do in Armenia probably will have to be paid private, and you will have to hire a translator because, well, maybe people in this room are an exception, but most people as tourists are not going to speak Eastern Armenian and be able to deal with the village farmer directly and ask him the questions and so on. The services, except for the road that's going between Yerevan through Armenia and maybe up to Jermuk, there are no rest stops. There is no place that you can stop. Now, when you get to the city, you can stop and take a potty break and so on, but I cannot imagine busloads of, okay, forgive me for saying these words, busloads of senior citizens that are going to tour Armenia, and every 4 hours they're going to be able to stop for a meal. It is hard to arrange something like that, and so these services just don't exist. Consequently, if you are thinking about getting involved in building production tourism, we'll talk about this a bit later in the talk, realize that there's a very intense effort that you as the tour operator would have to bring to make this successful. It is not simply a matter of, oh, they have this nice thing here and this nice thing there, and I'll put together and make a tour out of it. Yeah, they have this nice thing there and this nice thing there, but getting from point A to point B and worrying about sufficient transportation, driver that speaks English, and being able to stop for food along the way for a lunch or whatever, those are still major issues. Any questions on agritourism or the previous slide on biodiversity? Okay, so as I mentioned, there are dedicated and positive groups that are promoting the agricultural industry, and these are primarily international NGOs that I've already mentioned out. And in the case of the wine industry, the private owners that are working together, and so if there's some grant or loan made to the winery will build a tasting room, which is suitable for world-class tourism. And as you saw from the pictures, they're doing that. They have these nice places you can tour, and you can see the casks, and you can sit in a nice location with tables in the rocks and so on. So that part of the puzzle is working well together. Where the Armenian government is probably not involved in the agricultural sector as it needs to be, there are real problems with the laws. There are issues with village farmers that are really kind of desperate because they don't have a market that's large enough to sustain them, that if their cow gets sick, they'll look the other way and have their cow slaughtered, when really they will not have the money to pay for veterinary services to keep the cow healthy to make more milk. So in the areas of the rule of law and animal hygiene, animal husbandry, and safety,